recently announced.
Hi, good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher. Thank you very much for joining us this evening as we discuss the topic Elections 2020, Making Sense of the Small Parties. There are three political groupings represented here this evening. On my immediate left, and we go that way, Mr. Timothy Jonas, an attorney at law, practicing attorney at law, but in his role as a member of the ANOG. Sorry.
That was very mischievous.
And then Ruel Johnson, a man of words, so Citizenship Initiative.
Yes.
Dr. Josh Kanhai, who was here last week from
The new movement.
The new movement.
the New Movement, and Mr. Turhane Doerga, also of the New Movement. I have to say, gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk. I hope you know that as you move forward with your lists, you have to have female representation.
Yes.
So this evening is going to be an aberration.
Yeah, it's an anomaly.
Now, nomination day is set for January 10th, giving the electorate 52 days to campaign for elections on March the 2nd, some 437 days after the successful no confidence motion against the government. The fact that we are having elections now, elections are scheduled, nomination day has been set, elections day has been set, Parliament has not been prorogued or dissolved.
Dissolved, yeah.
Is this time to forget the government's shenanigans over the no confidence motion passed almost 1 year ago, not a couple of days, a few days, it's going to be 1 year ago? Is it time to forget that?
We can't forget a departure from what is legally required.
Yeah.
I don't think you can forget that. What we know is that we are still in a position in Guyana, unfortunately, that our democracy is so fledgling that most Guyanese will vote how they are going to vote. The tribal barriers, the ethnic barriers are still there. So that the supporters of one side will defend their side, and the supporters of the other side will criticize right or wrong strenuously, and we lose sight of policies. But as you say, we're there. So a date has been announced. I hope that no one manages to wriggle to postpone that date. And it is time to discuss policies and time for Guyanese as a whole to consider the rights and wrongs which have been done, consider the position Guyana is in economically, socially, decide if they are happy with what has happened over the last 50 years in Guyana. If they are not happy, decide what to do about it.
Ruel,
Um,
did you detect some cynicism or doubt in Tim's
well,
talk about the elections being set?
considering the fact that we have either flouted or come repeatedly close to flouting the Constitution, we have there's I think reason for caution. Now I've argued, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've argued that at this present time there's only one legal constitutional pathway to postpone elections. It's GCOM itself doing so. So I'm less cynical. I hope that wise ahead will prevail. The issue for me currently has to do with two things: the current naming of nomination day, some 20 days before what is the regularly statutory time limit, which is 32 days before election. So it's actually 52 days. That threatens to limit the possible exercise of franchise by preventing small parties from getting enough time to build a candidate list. So that's my major concern. Of course, the other major concern has to do with the non-dissolution of Parliament at present. We are now currently, as of I think yesterday, in the time frame that Parliament should be dissolved. It's not mandatory it should be dissolved now, but in terms of good governance, in terms of ensuring that finally Cabinet is ended and that the farce of keeping Parliament open, which could only be done in order to get approved spending, which government should not be doing now, continues. Because what it does, it in theory allows government to access the state funds.
But there hasn't been much spending. There hasn't been much authorized spending. They're not going. Money's being spent, but without any parliamentary approval.
Yeah, well, you see, this is not an issue, but the facade of Parliament is still there.
Okay.
So once you close that off completely, you then have to explain how it is that the expenditures be taking place.
Josh,
Right, well, my whole take on the situation falls in place with, say, Mr. Jonas and Mr. Johnson. And one of the main concerns that we're looking at is the same improvement of Parliament. Because as you rightfully said, funds are going to be spent, Guyanese money is going to be spent, and no one's going to be held accountable for it, because Parliament, no one's going to be knowing what Parliament is about, right? And the Cabinet is about. So that's one of the major issues we must look at. And if it doesn't happen within a certain amount of days, or weeks I should say, something needs to be done. People need to go out there and speak up about it. Concerning the issues with not abiding by the law and the Constitution, this lawlessness just proves to me that, as a young person, proves to me that these, I don't want to use the word old, but these old parties, these old cabals.
you've gone again with that.
These old cabals. I didn't say persons.
Every single one of us here has gray hairs.
I got
I'll
some
take
too.
Some more than others.
But here's what, these old cabals, I can't have them leading me. Because if you're going to be lawless, if you're going to be looking at the Constitution and saying, hey, we're not going to follow that, you're going to look at me too and say, hey, you can go do whatever you want. Right? So that's my whole take on it, and that's what we're looking at in the new movement right now.
Turhane, Doerga, what's your role in all of this?
Well, concerning this whole constitutional issue, I follow them because they're studying it, and I know that Timothy is one of their advisors, or they consult with him regularly. So I'm not a legal mind in that sense, so I will follow them. But having said that, I want to make a small remark while you start saying the small parties. I mean, these parties have enough time to grow, so I would prefer you say the new parties instead of small parties, because I am on the ground with these youngsters, and let me tell you, when I see the stamina which they have and the passion with what they want to change their country, and how they are fed up but at the same time doing something about it, to educate people and tell them that, and I like your new slogan that if you vote for the old, you're going to be left in the cold. So so they have the stamina. Yes, they are new parties, but they have time to grow. And I think, from what I see on the ground, that Guyana is ready for a real change.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure that they will remain small parties.
There were two particular issues, and there's no particular order for which you must respond, that I'd always been particularly concerned about. The question of Article 155, and that's persons with dual citizenship, or pledge allegiance, I think the Constitution says something to that effect.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that matter has been put to rest.
Yeah.
The other issue is the flagrant misuse of public resources
Yes.
for political electioneering
Yeah.
purposes. And that is becoming more evident daily.
Yeah.
Does this not render these elections coming up unfair even before nomination day? And why are the new parties, I'll consider that,
Yeah.
not making this a major public issue?
If I may, now, the trouble with that is that, and this is where we need constitutional reform, we need legal reform in terms of campaign financing and how it is campaigns are governed in general. There's always a gray line between what is legitimate expenditure for government outreaches, etc., and their actual campaigns.
But without trying to bring law into this,
Yeah.
this is a
It's a
lame
more-
duck government.
Yeah, of
So
course.
it's you can't judge it by the everyday standard.
Yeah, of course. But again, even from a lame duck perspective, and this is why this, for me, again, the solution is important, because with the solution, the pretense of parliamentary sanction, the pretense of a cabinet existing, and the vagueness of the CCJ judgment has allowed this continuation of cabinet, essentially. Although, following the 106.6, cabinet should have been dissolved. Is my
That's what the
Okay.
Chief Justice said.
yeah, but then
And that point was not really overruled. That was never an issue. But
yeah,
you don't
yeah,
want to get
yeah,
into
they
law.
do that. Yeah. So what we need to do going forward.
But bear in mind, my question is, why
Yeah.
is this not being made a major issue?
But as I said, what we need is the solution of the parliament, so that it puts us now into this new dispensation. Whereas, come January, and Tim would probably correct me or affirm this. Come January, we enter a new budgetary year. If Parliament is not dissolved, come January, pretense can be made to use a still existing Parliament, come January 1st, to legitimately authorize expenditure in the name of Republic anniversary celebrations, 50th Republic anniversary celebration, for example, 50th Republic anniversary activities. However, if it is you dissolve Parliament, as should be done now, what happens is that you are now constitutionally restricted from spending the maximum of 1/12 of this year's budget. So that is what we've been pushing for. Otherwise, come next year, you will definitely find massive abuse of state funds with the fig leaf of Parliament still in existence to give it legitimacy.
So you have confidence that because the government, President Granger, has dissolved the National Assembly, they are going to be responsible and
Well,
not use state resources
I think
for electionary
I think they're
purposes.
going to be constitutionally restricted if it is that they are. Yeah, you have to find in a new budgetary year. You can't have a supplemental budget for a budget that does not exist.
But isn't it that 1/12 of the previous budget? They have 2 months to spend that whole 1/12, so they will have.
No, but
enough
that,
money.
but that
I'm just asking.
yeah, but
I think it's per month.
per month.
It's per month.
Per month, and that
Okay, of the
that is supposed to go to
For the first
salaries,
4
etc.
months.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the,
for
for
the
4
question was that why isn't it an issue in
That's
in,
my
in
concern.
our
Yeah.
campaign? From what I see,
Because
you-
elections cannot be
Yeah.
fair if one
No.
party has
yeah.
Everything.
absolute access to
Yeah,
state resources.
No, but
And
Chris-
not only access, but misuses the state resources.
Chris, this is what I saw in the last meeting in with these youngsters, where they are telling each other that, look, we know that they're spending this money, so let us go and get. And they're telling the older people too, go and get what you can get. It's your money, but know who you're voting for. And why I'm
But-
not really confident, but I have good hope that people will think twice before they vote, is because people know the past and people are more educated now. And I see the social media campaigns going on.
Yeah.
People are being alerted of it. So I think it's going to be a different dispensation this
Well,
time.
I think
But
it-
again, I agree that
Yeah.
the some of the race voting is going to be there. Some of the old way of voting. Don't forget Apanjat is still alive somewhere. You understand? And those type of things. So it will still be an issue, but I don't think it will be that of a major issue like the previous campaign.
Well, there is
I wish I shared your optimism, Tim.
only
To answer your question, you're pointing out abuses, financial abuses, and underhand dealings by the party who happens to be an authority, making use of the power that they have.
Yes.
We have 50 years of that.
Yeah.
And if you point to instances of abuse, all you do is you add to the noise. Here's our problem in Guyana. In Guyana, with everything that we have, we are dirt poor next to Haiti. Why is that? That is because of bad management, corruption, friends and businesses economics, friends and family economics. So every single Guyanese is sitting anywhere. They're sitting in their living room, they're sitting in the corner shop, they're sitting in their churches. They know where we are and they know why we are here. As soon as we start pointing to specific misdeeds by one of the two parties, and it always happens that the party which is in government is the one that is in focus in terms of their misdeeds. What that does is that generates a discussion of tit for tat. Yes, they're doing that, but the other side used to do that. So who's the lesser of two evils? And you have a lesser of two evils conversation. Let me finish. As soon as you point any conversation to specific criticisms which engender a lesser of two evils conversation, you add to the noise.
Yeah, you're back
Because
to
you
square
then
one.
are back to a situation where the party loyalists on one side are saying, yes, he's corrupt, but this man used to take $50,000 to give away house lots.
Yes.
And yes, they're incompetent, but these boys used to... And you have more noise. And the party loyalists are vindicated in their unreasonable and tribal support for the party of their ethnicity. What
But-
we need to have is a conversation about where we want to go, why we are providing a new breath of fresh air, and not add to the noise.
But,
That's the
it,
thing
but
with your
I take
parties.
your point. But in trying to get there, one side is making it extremely difficult. We know that the litmus tests for elections, free and fair. Not
You
only
know-
free,
you know,
but it must
Chris,
be fair.
You blame one side, but let's go back.
No,
to
no,
the-
I'm talking.
Let's
as
go
I
back to
said,
the beginning.
these are issues I have been raising
Let's
Yeah.
go back to the
since 1997 elections.
beginning. Before this
Yeah.
show started, you were kind enough to show us a breakdown of elections results going back to 2001.
Yeah.
In 2001, there were 5 small parties who got votes, who were there on nomination day and got votes. After 2005, the 2 parties who enjoy their incompetent monopoly of the leadership of this country changed the rules so that they created a structure that it is now much more difficult for a third party to jump through all the hoops, even to make it to nomination day. You have to get so many signatures from each of 6 regions. You have to do all kinds of things just to get there. So your question directs the focus at one act of misconduct by the party that happens to be in government, and you're absolutely right. They are unreasonably and, in my view, unlawfully using funds that they don't have legitimate access to. But both parties have designed this thing to maintain their own monopoly.
Yeah.
And when Guyanese see them smiling at each other, chatting, slapping each other on the back, what they are doing is celebrating the fact that they have monopolized the leadership of this country, taken taxpayers' money, abused it, used it for their own personal corrupt means, and we are all suffering for it. So we need to move away from this small tit-for-tat conversation and look at the larger picture.
Yeah,
Find
the
it-
future.
As I said, my view is that it makes the elections unfair.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
which is the litmus test. But you want to make a point, Ruel?
No, I want to support what I'm saying. What we've had, and I think what would be useful to do is to point out that 2 things. One, it's not so much whataboutism, but the parallelism. You had, on the PPP, you had Gaisuko trucks being used to ferry
Yes,
supporters.
right. That's right.
On this
Now we have
administration,
army
Army
buses.
we also have government outreaches, which is essentially the same thing.
That's right.
In the lead up to the election year. What you have there on both sides, and it can be presented, and on a matter of principle, is that in both cases you have the demonstrated willingness to abuse state resources for political, electoral advantage.
Yes.
And as a principle that should be illustrated to people, say this is wrong. And going forward, if it is to be focusing on going forward, we're going to say we're going in the future revamp our electoral laws, revamp laws with regard to stuff like emoluments, because campaign financing. For example, in the US, if it is that somebody pays for something, like in the Trump case, like in Trump, he had an affair with a porn star, somebody
Stars,
else paid.
probably stars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one he's caught with. Somebody paid for her to shut up. That payment is seen as an electoral contribution that was not reported. We have to get to that level of transparency and that level of accountability so that everything that goes into the kitty that gives somebody an electoral advantage from a specific period. Let's say if we know the elections are going to be they're announced during the year, let's say 6 months before elections are reasonably expected to be held, that anything that goes into the kitty, whether it's support, whether it's free ads in the newspaper, that counts and has to be reported and has to be accounted for.
But Ruel,
Yeah.
that is
Or prevented.
that is what we can do in the future. I think Chris is pointing to what can be done now.
But all could be done now is awareness.
Yes,
We have to point
making
out.
noise.
Make
my
noise,
thing,
yes.
my
Yeah.
thing is that
Because
you
legal
should
we can't
make
do
it
anything.
Yeah.
a major public
Yeah.
issue. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
well,
Yeah.
but we are
So
starting that narrative.
All right. Thanks. I want to go
Yeah.
on. Another part, and this is the law now rather than practice, that makes it particularly difficult for the smaller new parties.
Yeah.
Each having to field candidates in at least 6 of the 10 geographical constituencies,
Yes.
representing 13 of the 25 geographical seats. Now, it doesn't mean just 6.
Yeah.
Because you could have 6 if you look at the representation. People like
But it
you
has
could
to
have
be-
6, but it doesn't make up 13.
Yeah. And the smaller ones.
Now,
Yeah.
that's a tall order
Mhm.
for small because you have to have signatures, proposals, and
The nominators are the real difficulty. You
The
can
real-
you create a body for them, but
yeah,
the
because you need it by region as well.
6 by 150 at minimum, there's how much?
900.
900. Then you need another 300 minimum, which is
Yeah.
1,200 people
That's correct.
to support your list. Yeah. It's a difficulty.
It's a monumental task, but to the credit of Josh and his teams, I have seen how they jumped on it after I think you guys consulted with Timothy and so forth, and they really
They're talking stories out of school.
Well, Turhane has mentioned it twice, so let me just put the cards on the table so
Yes.
that everyone knows and everyone watching your program knows.
yeah.
When you look at comments that people make about third parties, you see one stupidity mentioned over and over, and I'm not going to soften it. It's a stupidity. These people want money. These people want power. These people are taking for themselves. Oil is coming. That kind of nonsense. The chances of the new movement, Citizens Initiative, or any of the other small parties, including New and United Guyana, winning the presidency, I think we'll agree it's small. So one guy needs to
And
understand.
that's being generous.
One guy needs to understand. We're not getting any power from doing this, or any money,
Yes.
or any say, or any government portfolio. The reason that these folks have shown the courage that they have shown to butt that brick wall that is manifested, that is represented by the two-party monopoly, to take the step, stick their necks out, is because they recognize the harm that has been done over 50 years and they want to change it. Now, of all these parties, and this is not trying to get a first jump or anything, but we were one of the first. We started since January. And we were very happy when other parties announced, because the more people that show the courage to come out and say those two parties are harmful, one is just as bad as the other, you have 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, and Guyana must move forward to something better. The more people that show the courage to say that, the better I feel our democracy will work. And it shows, it reflects that we are becoming more mature as a people and as a democracy. So for me personally, I will do anything I can to help any of the parties, because the more that come, the more that are rejecting two large monoliths.
On this question of the more they come, however, I want to draw attention to the pattern of elections over almost 2 decades, which shows that votes for the small parties are usually wasted. I'm putting it crudely.
Yeah.
For example, in 2015, 2,100 votes cast for small parties received not a single seat. In 2006, one party alone received 2,571 votes, but not a single seat,
Yeah.
neither at the geographical nor at the national
National
top-up.
Yeah.
Most spectacularly, in 2001, three small parties captured 4,600 votes and yet won not
Collectively.
a seat. The record showed for those elections that if the largest of those small parties had combined with the smallest of those small
With a
parties,
seat.
they would have got a seat. Does this not make a case for you people and others who are not here to be coming together
Yeah.
if you really want to make people's votes count?
I want to say this, that you're absolutely correct, but in 2015 I saw it because I campaigned with the coalition. I saw it as all of us had a common enemy. We wanted the PPP out. So it was a kind of a different dispensation than 2001. This election, apparently from what I see, is we have two common enemies. And that makes a difference. But what you just said, and I saw that for the first time when you showed me this this evening, that indeed it makes sense that the new parties, because I refuse to talk about smaller parties.
We
Because
realize that.
because I see how especially TNM is growing leaps and bounds, and it's not easy. You should go with us. Tomorrow they're going to Madia. I was shocked to see the team this afternoon, and Sunday is Linden. So they're working. They have the stamina, and I don't want to say that we old people are we have mellowed down. We just don't have that kind of energy these youngsters have. You understand? So I think
I am
that
saying
it
you
is
need
true
more than
what
energy. You need
Yes.
you need strategy as
you
well.
need strategy. Yeah, and this I think this is very, very good that you're saying this. But Timothy said that from way back already when we had the first meeting.
There's one variable you haven't mentioned. The reality too is that in 2001, there was still very much a sense of PNC PPP, APNU PPP. But if you go to the history of the AFC, as people became more disillusioned with those two parties,
The party
you
grew.
see that as a question of numbers. By 2011, you had over 20,000 people, nearly 30,000, I think, who were not voting for either of those two parties.
2006, unprecedented. 2006, there was a 10-month span between the AFC launching and the AFC participating in elections. And within that 10 months, they ate into, they got 6 seats.
They got 5 seats.
Yeah, well,
So you've got
they
nearly
got 5
30,000 votes.
and a
Whereas
controversial
They had
last one.
28,000.
If you add up all of those 5
Yeah.
small parties in 2001, I think altogether they got about 4,000, 5,000
Yes.
votes.
So,
So the electorate as a whole is showing their maturity and their willingness
Exactly.
to bypass this ethnic polarization that the two parties benefit from.
what should be important as well as a distinction is that I keep making this case. We've had small parties emerging, new parties emerging, constantly throughout history, to varying success or lack thereof. I think what has distinguished this this phase, one is that we are a different process, part of the evolutionary political process, and in terms of the nature of the parties that are emerging, you have business, you have parties that have very strong legal representation as Anna, you have youth-based parties, you have Lennox Schumann, who is initially started with a direct appeal to the indigenous community, and you have a
Though that's not for the first time.
initially that was the initial thing.
No, but that's not for the first time we've had.
No. What I'm saying is that you had these parties, these sort of parties emerging at different points in history, but never together at the same time.
Yeah.
And that, for me, this is what it makes this process different. You have Fed Up, which is largely Berbice based, but you've never had them emerging at the same time. At least nothing that I've seen.
But if you get a multiplicity of those,
Yeah.
does it not make this point even stronger, that all of them, they're separate,
Yeah.
and therefore
Well, yeah, you're making the case clearly,
No, but
which
it,
I know
it makes sense.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that while we're going up to the nomination day,
yeah,
I think the new parties have enough time to reconsider their position.
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
And come together in the sense and work together.
yeah, of course.
You
Well,
understand?
let me point out that all the way back in September, we had
Sounds like a
meeting.
long time
Yeah.
ago.
Well, in the
It
context
feels
of
so.
the
It feels
Yeah,
so.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Sudden change of things. We had a meeting that,
Yeah.
and the New Movement and Federal United Party were quite clear, and we actually issued a statement to the media that the central tenet of our existence is the rejection of the two-party system in Guyana, and that if any of us found ourselves that we could not make it to the final post, we would throw our support behind another of the small parties. So even to that, from months ago, we have already made declarations that we are going to be working together because we recognize that the central harm in Guyana is two ethnic parties that encourage tribalism and polarization of our population.
Well
So
said.
we've said that from
Well said.
September.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Paul, is it correct? You people are the politicians. We are the observers. Is it correct for us to say that there is perhaps an obsession among small parties about presidential candidature? I want to be the presidential candidate. And is this not a stumbling block towards the path to democracy and to achieving the kind of goals you're setting yourself?
I never heard
thing
of
is-
that discussion.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Maybe you're not listening to the public.
No, what I would say is this.
No, that's what the public is saying, and what is often induced by the two old parties, the old politics.
Well, when we launched
But
October,
among these people, I never heard that.
when we launched October
Nobody even
18th,
discussed it.
we launched on October 18th,
Glad to know that.
and one of the
Oh, it's the truth.
All right.
yeah, when we launched on October 18th, we presented a program, we presented a group of people, and and then we had a question and answer segment. And one of the very first questions people asked is, who's the presidential candidate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We said we're not concerned with that. Right now, we are focused on consulting with people, developing a program, developing an agenda so we could get to people, have a cyclical process of consultation. Then, for the purposes of the list, at some point, we will name a presidential candidate because it's a requirement of the list. We only launched our presidential candidate today via Facebook, Rhonda Lamb. We made the decision much earlier, but she had some professional obligations she had that she could only come out then. But even though that decision was made, we had no interest in publicizing it at that point in time. Our interest has always been putting policy first. Because in the long run, this is what should matter. If you want to change the conversation from tribalism to the issues that actually affect people, you have to focus on policies. And I think all parties, all the emerging new parties, have been focusing on policy.
So Tim,
The thing-
so go on.
So for us here, we've seen that when we've gone on trips and we went to Berbice just this weekend, everyone wants to see a presidential candidate and a prime ministerial candidate. It's a Guyanese culture to have one, and it shows some sort of structure. And he said it's needed for the list, so that's why that's there. But our policy that we run on, and I said most of the new parties run on, is that the best man takes the job. So when an economist comes and asks a question, we have an economist there to answer that question. We have engineers, we have everyone. The specialists will tackle those questions, tackle those policies. So it's not a one-man show, it's a team. It's an essential team with everyone in place. Right? So it's not just PC, PM. No, not anymore. They're just there to, when people ask who's a PM, who's
Because
a PC,
it's the law.
it's there. Right?
So Tim, you share that view too, that there's no big deal about the it's the people who got this obsession rather than the
It is true,
political parties.
but I would go further.
Which is true.
The people
You said it is true.
that it is the people who seem to have that obsession. But
Okay.
I don't think it's fair to say the people.
Some
What has happened is that because 70% of Guyana are still party loyalists, will still vote for their party come hell or high water. What happens when you show your independence by announcing you are going a third party way is that you're met with a challenge. So the questions often come that are not designed to shed light, but are designed to poke holes.
yeah.
So that when you say we launch him, and I know each of these gentlemen have had the experience, who's your presidential candidate? Where's your manifesto? You have no experience. If your presidential candidate is too young, he has no experience. If he's too old,
Yeah.
well, he's old in age. So
I quickly answered
they are
by,
poking holes.
yeah,
And the point is well made and it needs to be emphasized.
Yeah.
There are a set of rules governing Guyana that make it difficult for a third party to break the two-party monopoly. But to break that monopoly, you need expertise from a core team within the party.
Yeah.
And a party that is coming to say to the public, we want to break the monopoly, has to be able to say, this is how we are going to do it. And even if we only get 2 or 3 seats, this is how we can achieve it.
Yeah.
So you need a message and a plan to show how you will achieve the results that you want. The AFC conspicuously failed to do that for 10 years. I do not understand how it is that they did not propose a single piece of legislation in Parliament, sitting, enjoying taxpayers' money and duty-free concessions for 10 years. But
They almost
as-
got there with the marijuana thing.
No, but that was parked. But before we go on, let
But
me.
as a minority,
Yeah, when that
as
is
a
finished.
minority
Yeah.
party, if you have a couple seats that give you a swing vote, there is a lot that you can do. with it.
Absolutely.
And that's what the New United Guyana has been trying to preach, that if you have the expertise and you have the vision and you understand where changes can be made in the system, the first step is to engender a system of inclusivity so that whoever's in opposition have a say in the
Yeah.
decision-making power.
Exactly.
That can be done if you have the swing vote in Parliament with 2 or 3 seats.
Before we go ahead, there's something that I think that should be noticed here, and unfortunately it's not reflected here, and I think this incidentally. For the very first time, I mean, we get the nomination, there's not an issue, but for the very first time in Guyanese history, as far as I know, you have 3 women who've indicated that they will be presidential candidates for political parties. 3 women. There is Asha Kissoon from New Movement. There is Pastor Valerie Leung from the newly reformed Republican Party. And then there's Rhonda Lam from Citizenship Initiative. So for me, that is unprecedented, and that is how the focus that we should be looking at. 3 women in a country that has been historically patriarchal. So that says something.
Now, you are represented here this evening. 3 of the groups, the new parties, the New Movement, New United Guyana, and Citizenship Initiative. If I were to ask each of you what you regard as the 3 most critical issues facing Guyana, is it likely that the 3 of you will have a coincidence of views on this matter?
I would say likely, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, tell me what you 3 are. I wouldn't ask you to write it and give me the
We could probably do that.
Secret ballot.
Constitutional reform, I think, is one. I think all of us, either explicitly or implicitly, by what you expect to change, is how the Constitution deals with issues like access to the democratic franchise, as explained with these basic requirements for participation, the reduction of presidential powers, and of course, whatever iteration inclusive governance. Yeah,
That's one.
there's one.
What are the other 2?
Public accountability, and of course, I think economic diversification and growth, equitable economic diversification and growth. Because you can't just have a fixed legal system and the economic system remains as skewed as it is.
Who will speak for the New Movement?
Well, for the New Movement, we are pushing a lot for same constitutional reform. That's something that the country needs. It's a basic infrastructure that must be set in place, and I believe all three of us have that in common. In addition to that, economics is a big deal. Through economics, you can have branding, marketing, everything under economics. We're gonna have, because without this vibrant economy, we cannot have a proper social welfare system or a drive for any other business sector in the country. For us, we're gonna prioritize health as well, right? The country, the people needs to be healthy in order for us to have quality human resources. Without quality human resources, none of this can function. So that's going to be another priority for us, and that's the beauty about it. We all have strengths which we can complement each other with, right? So that's our main focus.
Tim?
I think I would be a bit more detailed. You see, if you start with constitutional reform, you fall. Because to change the constitution, as you know, you don't just need a majority at parliament. The rules of the game, you need 2/3. You need much more than a majority, which will not happen. The last time it happened was under a rigged parliament back in 1980, and with a few minor amendments after there was burning and looting in the streets in the 2000s.
Well, you had the Hardmanson reform as well.
That was as a result of protests
Yes,
and burning and looting in the streets.
and looting again.
But
Yes.
so to start with a conversation of constitutional reform, I think it's definitely the end result. But given the rules of the game, you can't start with that. You have to start with accepting the limitations which you will have. I believe we will get a swing vote. I believe that whichever of the two large parties gets into government will have a minority in parliament. That's the first step. Parliament must be independent so that the opposition parties must have the majority so they can pass laws. With that power, you can immediately do two things. You can force the government, whichever of the two harmful parties it is, to cooperate with the opposition in order to pass any laws. So you have the leverage to do that immediately.
Or to pursue policies that you yourself would be advocating.
So you immediately have a measure of leverage
Yes.
to achieve some policies. Second, you can use that swing vote to give the opposition more say where the purse strings are. All the agencies, all the government-owned corporations that hold the purse strings, the Guyana Energy Agency, the EPA, Central Housing and Planning,
NISIL, big one.
NISIL, their boards can be fixed that there is representation by the opposition with a real say, with actually the deciding say, so that monies that go to those agencies are no longer available to a minister by a phone call, but go into the consolidated fund, so that when government needs money to spend, they do what the Constitution contemplates they should do in any event, which is go to Parliament to have the thing approved. So that immediately reduces corruption and increases your leverage in Parliament to say to whichever parties in government, you got to talk to the other side and you got to talk to us to get things done. Now, I know in United Guyana have posted on their Facebook, and I myself have done a video on it, of the type of constitutional reform that we have in mind. First of all, for the size of our economy, we have an embarrassingly large government. The size of the government is so ridiculous. So much money is spent just maintaining this enormous structure of useless people who do minimal work. Small government is
Speak
the
on
first
ministers,
step.
by the way.
Sorry?
You speak on ministers, by the
Small
way.
government is the first step to a thriving economy. So we have in mind 5 constitutional ministries, no more than 5, so that the different agencies, for example, you have a ministry of social advancement, health will fall as a department within that. And what we are trying to advocate is that when you have an elections, the party that wins the most votes will be able to appoint 2 ministers. The party that wins the second most votes will be able to appoint 2 ministers. The party that wins the third most votes will be able to appoint 1 minister. And in the 5-year electoral cycle, those 5 individuals will form a cabinet and they will each run one of the constitutional ministries for 1 year in rotation. We call it the Swiss model because that is actually what they do in Switzerland. And the effect is that you have immediate transparency because there are 5 of us sitting here. And if a decision is taken,
It wouldn't be this 5, I can assure
but
you.
it doesn't matter. If you have 2 from the
Never know.
PPP, 2 from the
Never know.
APNU, and 1 third party, any decision taken here, first of all, has the immediate advantage that neither ethnic group gets an advantage. The whole family and friends economics goes out the window. Because if you want to hire somebody to be CEO of Georgetown Hospital, you'll get the best person for the job. Because his friend is not going to be it, and my friend is not going to be it. You'll get the person who's most qualified. And if you do something underhand, they will be kicking and screaming and immediate transparency. So that you need a system of inclusive governance because immediately, let's talk about corruption and talk about thieves and all of that. Immediately, the family and friends things goes. We have seen, since 2015, a cleansing of the public service, where people of one hue are removed and people of another hue are put in.
Cleansing meaning not,
No.
it has become
Meaning
clean.
ethnic cleansing. But I don't say that as a criticism directed solely at the APNU. Because for there to have been an ethnic cleansing, it meant that people of one hue were there in the first
Yes.
place before 2015. So both parties have been equally guilty of putting family and friends in positions of power. If a plenary, if a cabinet represented by all sides were making those decisions, that wouldn't happen anymore. And that to me is the first step and the final step to solve our problems in Guyana. Small government and transparency.
We have about 10 minutes left for the program. I want to raise 3 issues that you have not raised that citizens like myself would probably put somewhere high up on their personal interests. Security,
Yeah.
poverty, almost as a public health issue, as we said.
Yes, sir.
This headlong rush into petroleum economy
Yeah.
without any kind of
Safeguards.
laws, safeguards. Where do you 3 parties stand on these issues?
Well, first of all, there is what we found in going about the country, that there's a direct correlation between security and poverty. A good example is Potential Wales area. People that we met there told us that there's been a consequent rise in crime and criminality with the closure of the estates. So you see that correlation right there. And I think the same issue that's happened in Essequibo with the issues with rice there. The same issues happened with Skeldon. Now, you need economic diversification to combat poverty. You need a public accountability to ensure that the growth, economic growth, when it does happen.
But you appreciate
it
that oil can in fact run counter to that.
No, which I'm getting to. And for us, oil is an accelerator of things. So if there's a negative
Consequence
growth,
of it, yeah.
then it accelerates negative growth. If there's positive growth, it accelerates that. We are in a period right now where we see negative,
Which is the resource course.
which is a resource course. There has not been enough focus on economic activity outside of oil. That in the GSDS.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah. So what we intend to do is ensure that, first of all, how the revenues are invested, are targeted. We don't have the time for it, but we have to look at the issue of cash transfers. We have to look at the issue of where the oil monies go. We can't go investing in luxury goods in Europe alone. We have to have some sort of equity investment, development investment in Guyana, in farms, in creative industries, etc. So all those are things we're considering right now. And of course you have to invest in public security outside of $180,000 in drones.
Josh?
Well, the
Dr. Doerga,
the TNM has put out a document called the Roadmap to Prosperity, where exactly those things you're saying we have outlined. One is that you cannot have a thriving industry or a development of industries without affordable energy. Two is that while everybody's talking about the sovereign wealth fund, we call it the Development Bank of Guyana, and we have enough professionals like yourself and so which can analyze where that money has to be spent in. We don't need overseas people to comment on it.
Yeah.
The third thing is that you have to eradicate poverty, and we have at length analyzed why hemp is an alternative crop which has 10 to 20 times more income per acre than rice. That does, you will have to do a few things. You have to zone it, because the minute you let it go, nobody is going to plant rice anymore. So you have to zone it. So you can eradicate poverty because your first crop is within 4 to 6 months. And everybody knows how we have revolutionized rice between 89 and 92. It can be done. Guyana has to be proud of it. In the international world, you can see that
I
they
must
did.
stop you there.
Yeah.
Tim, to give Tim a chance, because I want to
Yeah.
ask one final question,
Yeah.
and you'll have some time to expand on that. Tim?
We have traditional areas of income that have worked, except for horrible, woeful mismanagement. And a free economy is what's needed. And any revenue from oil has to be directed to build infrastructure. They talk about cheap energy, build bridges, build roads, get the produce from the back dams where they are now inaccessible, from the areas in Essequibo where they're inaccessible from the northwest. We have to have a road network, a rail network. We have to have cheap energy that is available and affordable and reliable, because without that you will not have a manufacturing sector, you will not have an industrial sector. So you need to use oil money not for direct payments to people, cash transfers, that kind of nonsensical idea, but to build the infrastructure so that people are empowered to make their
But
investments.
Tim,
and make
since
the
this is
economy
the
work.
patrimony, and
Yeah.
very quickly, this is the patrimony of all Guyanese, present and future, what about intergenerational saving?
Here's the thing. If you try to hedge money now, when our infrastructure is in such a woeful state, then you're not helping anyone.
No, you can balance it. You can balance
such,
it.
we have
You
such,
can balance it, can't
we
you?
have such enormous needs now that we have to start fixing things so that we can see the economy turning around. You said that there's high crime. The reason there's high crime is that the government has devastated the economy by closing sugar estates, harming timber, chasing Baram and Baishanlin out to the
200
country,
taxes.
hurting the gold industry, saying to the gold miners, too bad for y'all got to change, we now got a green economy, when that's the largest foreign exchange earner. You have to foster those industries and make them work, and you have to fix our sea defense, because these agricultural lands that everybody's so proud about is going underwater. So there are enormous needs that got to be fixed now.
The operator's obviously working with a different time from me, so I've got to rush this one. The final question I'm going to be asking you, and you will come back to Plain Talk at any time you wish. How would you like to define yourself as a party to the electorate? 30 seconds.
We're young, vibrant, educated youths that are here to make a change. We're going to call spade a spade, and we're not going to take any nonsense. It's our time to take this leadership and to move Guyana forward into a country that's the likes of Dubai of the Caribbean, the Singapore, the South Korea, the Silicon Valley, you name it. We're going to make it happen here because we have the potential and we have the backings.
Yeah, our symbol is, our slogan is very simple. We want to look at political transformation through civic empowerment. We want to have citizens essentially know and practice what we call participatory citizenship, not just go and vote at elections and leave it at that and abdicate their rights to politicians. We're encouraging people to build structures and institutions in which they can be constantly guiding government and not being controlled by them.
Tim, you have the last say.
To break the back of the monopoly held by the two parties is our central focus. And for that reason, I am not going to try to say anything negative about what was just said. I want to endorse what was just said, and I want to say small parties need to help to break the back of the monopoly, because if that is done, the family and friends economics goes and the country will prosper.
Agree.
Dr. Turhane Doerga, Dr. Josh Kanhai, Mr. Ruel Johnson, Mr. Timothy Jonas. Thank you very much for appearing on Plain Talk. Rather short notice, I must
Yeah.
admit. So it's been, I hope, useful exchange for the viewers. So I'd like to thank the operators and viewers, and to say that next week I will be out of the country, but I will be recording a program on local content in the context of the petroleum sector. Until then, thank you and good night.